So, time for a bit of an update on the Panda Cross. I'm about 2 months in now and done just shy of 800 miles, so we should be able to push this engine a little bit more assertively. So I'm going to talk a bit about the experience of driving this car. I'm still struggling somewhat with the very low first gear, extraordinarily low first gear, and second gear is pretty low as well. This is an off-road car at the end of the day, and that's the purpose of those low gears, but it is a struggle, especially given the particular characteristics of this engine. I have heard people talk about, or I've seen people in the forums talking about a power lag with the TwinAir engine, and that's a bit of a misunderstanding, really. I mean, yes, if you drive this like a 1.5 litre diesel engine car or a large capacity petrol engine car, you're going to get a power lag, if you want to call it that, when you're changing gears. And the reason for that is this is a very different kind of engine, and you have to drive it with some understanding of how that engine behaves. This is a very high revving, relatively high revving, low capacity twin cylinder engine, and you've got to keep the revs up. You've got to drive it really like a two-stroke motorbike. And what I mean by that is you've got to, this engine spins up and down very quickly, so when you put the clutch in to change gear, the revs are going to immediately fall rapidly, and unless you blip the throttle while you feed the next gear in to keep those revs up, or to re-establish those revs, you're going to get bogged down, because this engine doesn't really deliver power at low revs. I understand that on the 4x4 and the Cross there is a feature that manages the engine revs if you change down too quickly, in order to avoid the wheels locking. It will actually effectively blip the accelerator and keep the revs up. Now as far as I know, there's no equivalent for when you're changing up. It'd be pretty useful if there was. But in the absence of that, you've got to do it manually. Just trying to get the knack of keeping the engine revs up during the gear changes, really. So let's have a bit of a go. 4,000, 4,500 into fourth gear. Of course, we're at the speed limit now. So once you get into third, fourth, fifth gear, these, the ratios are a lot more conventional. We've got a bit of some twisties coming up, so let's see how we do here. So we've got to go down to fourth here initially. Probably going to get third as well. About now. What a beautiful day. I might even need second here, really. No, keep it in third. Now, of course, there's a car in front, so we're not going to get a chance to muck about. I'm not going to go for an overtake on this road. This is a little bit too marginal for that. Maybe I will go for an. It's a Land Rover. Freelander. Oh, I can easily get him here if he's. That pulled pretty well there, but it took a bit of a. Did take a bit of a run up to get around that guy. I better be careful here. I've seen deer along here before, so I don't want to be hitting any deer. Okay, so we're at 30 miles an hour in third gear, and we're leaving the speed limit. See, third gear's pretty good, as long as when it'll pull pretty good, as long as when you're feeding it back in, you've got good clutch control. So there's a good spread of torque available. The ratio's high enough that you can get up a bit of speed with third. Whoa, that was tighter than I expected. So what else can I say about this car, the Panda Cross? Well, I've had it long enough and I've been driving it enough now to pass that point where I'm pretty confident that it's been a good decision. Still very different to my old car, but you know, by now I could have been thinking, oh my god, I've made a terrible mistake and regretting it. I'm certainly not feeling that. It's got its idiosyncrasies, but it's more than capable for what I need, and it's actually quite a lot of fun to drive. Because the other problem with this high revving engine is, until you get the knack of doing those gear changes smoothly, you do run the risk of over speeding the engine if you miss the gear. I don't know, I say over speeding, I mean not really. It's there's a lot of headroom, but you know, particularly when you're running it in, you really don't want to be revving it up to the red line, because that's not going to do the engine any good. I don't like these door pillars very much. The sort of front door pillar, windscreen surround, you know, that adds up to quite a blind spot, particularly when you're going around if you're turning into a road. That's kind of intrusive. What else? Well, you know, I've mentioned the instrumentation and the switch gear. I don't like the fact that all these switches are on push buttons and sort of electronic controls. I'd much rather have knobs and clicky switches, rotary encoder controls. The climate control is a case in point. Do you know what? The climate control, I still haven't figured out really how that's behaves in very odd ways that are not very intuitive. But I don't like the fact that it's all on push buttons. You know, on my old car I had a knob which controlled the ducting, and I had a knob which basically controlled the desired temperature. So we had blue in one direction, red in the other direction, and once the engine was up to temperature, when you moved that knob, you got pretty much instantaneous change in the direction you desired, and controlling the temperature was easy. So that climate control, you know, so the idea is you put it on auto, it controls the speed of the fan and it moves the ducts around to attain and then maintain the selected temperature. What tends to happen, and maybe it's doing that, I don't know, but what tends to happen is in the morning, you know, you get in the car, obviously it takes a while for the temperature to get up to operating temperature, so it stays cold and then what I find is it'll suddenly start getting warm, and you know, I'll select something like 21 degrees or 20 degrees and it feels like it's overshooting. Now it's not clear what auto is supposed to do. There is I probably should say something about the manual, come on to that in a minute, but there are some override buttons. If I press the windscreen heat button, I can hear the duct swivelling, the auto light goes out. I could feel the footwell air vents seem to have shut off, and it does do a good job of demisting the windows when required. And then there's I could direct it to the footwell or to my, in my face, and there's different combinations of those permitted. But really, it's very mysterious how this works. Going back to the manual, there is a section for the climate control, but in a way that's fairly characteristic of this manual. That section is what I would call authoritatively vague. So it says things like, on the face of it, quite detailed, but it amounts to select auto mode and the climate control will automatically control the cabin temperature. Now I'd like to know what the algorithm is and how it does that. And another thing about this manual, while we're on it, this seems to be a manual for every model of Panda currently in production. So it will mention things that I may or may not have fitted in my car, but I don't know. There's one section which, it's acronym City. It's talking about active safety systems. So we've got, some of these are a little bit more obvious than others, but we've got ABS, ESC, HH, ASR, HBA, ELD, HDC. I think that's all. Now, if you look at these things, it says things like where fitted, where offered in your country, where appropriate. It doesn't tell me whether I've got these things or not. Hill-Hole I've discovered that accidentally. ABS, obviously, I think that's a legal requirement. ESC, I've got some form of the electronic stability control program. Do I have hydraulic brake assist? I don't know. ASR. £16,000 for a car. I want a manual for that car, not for a bunch of other miscellaneous cars that I don't own. Okay, coming back to basics, we've got climate control. For the couple of weeks after I bought this car, it was very hot weather, and to its credit, the aircon keeps the temperature down. That works well. It demists well. We're just going into the winter now, and time will tell if it's going to be a useful system in managing the cabin temperature in cold weather. Just coming back to that thing about what I've got fitted and what I haven't got fitted, I don't know from reading that manual or from fiddling about whether I've got any sort of auxiliary electric heater. There is some talk of if the outside air temperature is sufficiently low and the engine temperature is low, some models of Panda apparently have an auxiliary electric heater fitted, which presumably starts to provide heat to the cabin before the engine's up to temperature. Have I got that? Who knows? Maybe when we've got some freezing mornings I'll discover that. Other niggles. Been playing with the four-wheel drive. Again, not really off-road. The only thing I've noticed is when you switch it to four-wheel drive, when you switch it back to normal mode, it reactivates the stop-start, so that can catch you out. If you've been driving without stop-start, you put it into four-wheel drive and come out again. Be prepared for that. You just have to go and re-establish that by pushing the button on the dash. But it would be nice if that remembered your preference for all time, really, until you changed it. A few miscellaneous things. Well, these are hardly deal breakers, but some things seem like cost-cutting measures. Some things are just baffling, because they don't seem like cost-cutting, and yet they're bizarrely useless. So the tailgate, for example, it's got this pathetic little nylon strap that's not big enough to get your hand through for pulling the tailgate closed. My old car had simply a handhold moulded into the plastic moulding. Why couldn't Fiat do that? God knows. The tailgate closure is some sort of electronic system. It's not a mechanical handle at all. They call it soft touch, so you open it, it's some sort of micro switch, it deactivates the lock, or it opens the lock, and then the tailgate opens, and when you slam it, it locks again. Why? What's the point of that? If you read the manual, one of the less useful consequences of that is that you can actually lock the keys in the boot, and you can't get them out again.
And if you want to release the tailgate, I can't remember the circumstances under which you'd want to do this, but if you want to release the tailgate without using the, I mean, maybe if the micro switch breaks or something, you've got to put the back seats down, get in the boot, get a screwdriver out, prise some sort of plastic cover off the lock, and press something with your screwdriver. The logic of making the tailgate work like that escapes me. I just want a handle that opens it. So there you go, Fiat. What else? What other niggles? The toolkit. I opted for the Space Saver spare wheel, and I got the spare wheel, and it fits below the floor in the boot, but the toolkit doesn't. The toolkit comes with a jack and a wrench for getting the wheel nuts off. The wrench, by the way, is made of aluminium or some sort of aluminium alloy, which doesn't seem well thought out to me. I mean, I haven't tried taking the wheel off with that, but that's a softer metal presumably than if you made it out of steel. I don't know how they couldn't put a steel one in there. But the toolkit is in a big fat bag that sits on the boot floor. Now in my old car, and actually in older versions of this car, the toolkit fits within the well of the Space Saver wheel, but not so in the Fiat Panda Cross 2016 model, certainly. So what I might do is actually take that toolkit out of the, it's in a soft bag, I might take it out of the boot and just stick it behind one of the seats here, because I'm not, I don't take people in the back of this car, generally anyway. Yeah, that's about it for now.
You've got to get used to the knack of blipping that power back in or just before you re-engage the next gear. So, I'm out of fuel. Okay, it's showing low fuel. I've done 203.9 miles according to the display. We're going up a hill, so maybe that fuel tank sensor's affected by the orientation of the car. Well, it hasn't gone out. Okay, change of plan. I think I better go and get some fuel. You don't get much between fill-ups in this car, that's my experience. The gauge has still got a couple of bars on it, but the warning lights come on. So it still requires a lot of tap dancing, changing up through those first 3 gears. But we're getting the hang of it. And actually generally, once you're on the go, you don't need to drop below 3rd gear, and it's much more controllable with a bit of sensitive clutch work, really. I've heard criticism of the seats. I think the seats are quite comfortable, quite upright, a little bit far from the steering wheel for liking. I'm still playing with that, really. I can get closer, but then my legs have to be more kind of cramped. It'd be nice if you could adjust the reach on the steering wheel, but you can't. So would I recommend this car? Well, so far, yes. I mean, in terms of what I want to use it for, I think it's a more than adequate replacement for the Polo. It's certainly up to the job. I don't like that, small fuel. Well, it's either a small fuel tank or a very high consumption. But we only got 205 miles out of that tank before the warning light came on. Now obviously I don't know how much reserve capacity there is after the light comes on, and then can't really experiment with that without running the risk of stranding yourself. So 200 and some miles is pretty much the benchmark, I think, which is not great. The other car used to do 450 or something on a tank. So that is a downside. If you're going to be touring with this car in the wilds of Scotland or something, you might want to put some extra cans of petrol in the boot or on the roof or something. I'd be kind of curious to drive the diesel version, but everything I've heard about the diesel engine says that particularly when it's only got 5 gears, this one's got 6. But you know, when you're on the motorway in 5th gear in that diesel, the reports of how it feels are not good. It's noisy, it's buzzy. I suppose that's a trade-off between how it is low down and at the top end. I suppose I'd like to drive it just out of curiosity, but I think this engine's fine. You know, the measure of an engine like this is how long it's, well, not just the fact that it reviews well, but how long it's been in production. I think this has had the TwinAir since 2012, and you know, they've just announced the specifications for the Panda Cross for 2017, and it's got the same engine choices. In fact, everything's pretty much the same. All they've changed is added a couple of colours, and they've changed the entertainment system. I don't know what they've changed, but you know, this Blue and Me system, I don't know if they've replaced that with something else. That's neither here nor there, unless you're in the smartphone business and want to mess about with plugging that into your car. So it's obviously a well thought of engine. There is talk of there being, I don't know how credible this is, there is talk of a multi-air, I think it's called multi-air engine, might be mixing that up with the multi-jet, which is rumoured to be a 3-cylinder engine. That sounds plausible, you know. My Polo had a 3-cylinder diesel engine, but I'm not sure if that's actually just a rumour for the Panda, but it's certainly not coming anytime soon. There we go, the Fiat Panda Cross.